Monza is a town 8 miles northeast of Milan, and at the end of its most elegant thoroughfare, the Royal Palace presides over a huge public park. Hidden within the parameters of the park is the Autodromo Nazionale di Monza. Today sees the first qualifying session for the race, and just after dawn, the dew still clinging to the fir trees, Monza braces itself for the invasion of the famous Italian tifosi, the most ardent of all motor racing supporters. 15 minutes away from the circuit is the Hotel Umberto I, Nigel's base for the week.
Good morning, everybody. Here we are, 8 o'clock in the morning. I was going to say the San Marino race, but I've corrected myself. It is the Monza race, of course. A lot of things have been happening. We've had incredible tropical storms the last 2 days. I mean, I hope that it's actually blown over, but the front that's been hanging around the last 2 days has been incredible. I'd say several inches of rain has fallen. We played golf on Wednesday in a charity function which raised $60,000 for children's charities, which was very, very good. We are currently in the 11th hour of the contract situation. I'm supposedly going to be having an offer tonight or tomorrow morning, and I would say that things are going to be very lively, perhaps later today and certainly tomorrow. As for the job in hand, same as normal, back to the office, 10 o'clock this morning, practice. The track obviously is going to be wet, so I think I'm not going to go out for the first 10 minutes or so and just see how the cars are performing. If they're up to speed, then I'll jump in the car and go. Try and have an easy morning, and then of course qualifying 1 till 2 o'clock. But the most important thing today is where you'll catch up with me later on this afternoon at, I think it's 5:15. It will invite you to the muddiest, probably dirtiest, in more ways than one, football match of the season. We'll see you then. See you, everyone.
While Nigel goes off to work, there's time to explore the treasures of Milan. Wherever you go in Milan this week, it's impossible to ignore the affection for motor racing, and Ferrari in particular. Meanwhile, at the 5.8-kilometre circuit in Monza, amid mounting contractual chaos, Nigel did his talking on the track. He took provisional pole with a lap of 1 minute 22.586 seconds, ahead of his rival Ayrton Senna, who clocked 1 minute 22.822. The Frenchman Jean Alesi had the tifosi in raptures. Third place for his Ferrari. Football is next on Nigel's agenda, playing for a camel celebrity team against Formula One photographers. So too is Riccardo, an Italian with football in his blood. Also looking to win a medal today is Michael Schumacher, for once in the same team as Nigel. The celebrities were clear winners, 6-4, and Nigel stepped up with captain Flavio Briatore from Benetton to hold the trophy aloft. Provisional pole and a winner's medal, not a bad day's work.
Morning.
Good morning. A little bit stiff this morning, but I think you know the answer why to that. Feet are hurting incredibly. But it's going to be another nice day, I hope. You can tell from the voice that I've been shouting too much. Got to defend the pole position today. I think that the car should be a little bit better, but all credit again to McLaren and Honda, because they got a lot closer yesterday, and I think their active car has made a very, very big improvement. The engine is still working extremely well, and I think this race could be very difficult for us.
There was confirmation earlier yesterday of the world's best kept secret all year. Honda have officially announced they're withdrawing from Formula One next year.
Well, I don't think it's a secret, and I think you've got to actually clarify that. They're pulling out of Formula One from the point of view of total support, but they are going to have the Mugen engine. From my sources anyway, Ron Dennis will still have a Honda engine next year, but it will be done by Mugen. So they'll still be there, but not in the same sense that obviously they are now as a major sponsor.
The media were putting two and two together with Michael Andretti's arrival at McLaren, and he's tied up with Ford, and the suggestion was that McLaren would have Ford engines at their disposal.
I don't know. I mean, that is a possibility, and of course, you know, you mustn't rule anything out, but I would be surprised if they get the Ford engine straight away. But nothing should surprise me in Formula One. No doubt, as you'll find out later today.
But in the process, Alesi lost control under braking, collided with Morbidelli, took the rear wheel off the Ferrari. A very spectacular shunt, quite harmless of course, but just indicates how hard Alesi and Ferrari are trying. And in fact, there was another incident this morning which Allard, I know, is dying to tell you about, and I'll hand over to you, Allard. Tell them about Mika Hakkinen. What happened to him here on Saturday morning?
Well, Mika Hakkinen came down the straight, nice, quiet, flat out, and the steering wheel came off, John.
Well, that's not the first time it's happened to Mika, because his first Grand Prix for Lotus last year in Phoenix, he had the same problem coming onto the pit straight. Suddenly the wheel came off in his hands. He locked the brakes on, the car came to a stop. Nobody knew at the time what the problem was. Well, it's happened now here at Monza. It's very worrying indeed, because something like that really, at the circuit like Monza or anywhere, the team very concerned indeed as to find out the reasons why. But in the meantime,
Well, John, apparently he knocks it off. He knocks off the release with his knees. That's the most likely thing the team reckons is happening. Now, I don't know whether it's true, but that was the explanation given to me.
Yes, it seems an unlikely thing, Allard, because the locking ring on the steering wheel is quite small. And for him to get his legs up that far behind the steering wheel, I would say it would be virtually impossible to drive the car. But whatever the problem that Lotus has is obviously a very concerning problem. And they are doing everything that they know to ensure that the locking device on that removable steering wheel is working correctly.
The current situation here in Monza is that Nigel Mansell is on the pole position, a 1:22.586. Then it's Ayrton Senna on a 1:22.822. Jean Alesi is third on a 1:22.976. Riccardo Patrese is fourth. Gerhard Berger fifth. Michael Schumacher sixth. Martin Brundle is in seventh place. Eighth, Ivan Capelli. Ninth, Mika Hakkinen. And 10th is Thierry Boutsen. And it's very early days in the session here, so we don't expect times to drop dramatically because the times this morning weren't very fast.
Allard, we've got Damon Hill in the booth with us, and Damon spent quite a lot of time down here recently testing for Williams, and we're hearing continually about the physical efforts that Mansell and Patrese have got to deal with when they drive their Williams Renaults. But Damon, can you tell us what it is like to go around the Monza circuit in a 1-minute 22-second bracket?
Well, I can say that Monza, fortunately, is not as hard as some of the circuits in terms of output, driver output. But nevertheless, you're lapping in the sort of lap times that would normally be associated, well, last year would have been associated with pole position on qualifying tyres, but you're doing that every lap. So the stresses every year get greater and greater, and the effort through the steering wheel becomes harder and harder to actually even hold on to the steering wheel.
Well, we're led to believe that an actively sprung car is a lot easier physically to drive than the conventional passive car, because a lot of the absorption of bumps is taken up in the active system itself. Yet you're saying the loads are actually very much higher than a conventional passive car.
Well, the loads are greater simply because the car is travelling faster. It's all related to the amount of G that the car generates going around a corner. The faster the car is going, obviously the more grip and the more loads you get through the steering wheel. And generally speaking, you're right in saying that the active car takes some of the roughness out of the ride. But on the other hand, those sort of inputs to the driver are what help the driver ascertain how quickly to go.
Well, taking that a stage further, we have seen in world sports car racing that Peugeot have got a power steering system. Could you envisage Williams, for example, looking in that direction to try and take away a lot of that physical effort?
Well, it certainly would be appreciated, I think.
Current situation here is that Michael Schumacher has gone quicker than his time from yesterday. He's the second man to improve, because the first man to improve in his time, and that was substantially, is Carl Wendlinger, who did a 1:26.6 yesterday and is now down to 1:26.0, and Wendlinger was 7th fastest in this morning on-time session.
Well, March, like many of the teams, we mentioned this yesterday, those people that have not had the opportunity to test at Monza prior to the Grand Prix are at an initial disadvantage. Usually on the second day we see an improvement in time. We saw it with Lotus certainly yesterday. We're now seeing it in particular with Wendlinger, and that will be the case. But what we've also seen here over the 2 days is that the 1-minute 25-second bracket is going to be the heart of the race. Wendlinger was 7th this morning, and all the way down to 17th there's about 0.9 of a second. So those 10 cars covered by just under that second, and that is going to be, for us, really the heart of the race. At the front, of course, we believe the 2 Williams will disappear, and then you'll have the 2 McLarens, the 2 Benettons, one of the 2 Ferraris, and as I say, possibly a Ligier or Carl Wendlinger. But the real crux of the race is going to be somewhere between 10th and 20th place.
Wendlinger improving again now to 18th place on a 1:25.755. And also Kiyo Katayama, who's just improved, he's in 23rd position, and that leaves Christian Fittipaldi and Stefano Modena for the moment as not qualified.
Well, Christian Fittipaldi we see as he comes out of the 3rd chicane, and last night Christian was meant to be at a sponsor dinner. but he was so unhappy with the performance of his Minardi Lamborghini that he stayed away from that dinner, worked with the engineers for quite a long time last night in an effort to try and understand why his car is that much slower than Morbidelli. Morbidelli is currently in 17th place, substantially quicker than Christian. Now, of course, Christian is trying to get back up to speed after that layoff due to the neck injury he received in Manicourt at the end of June, the beginning of July. And look, there's an engine blow up, I would say, or a lot of breathing from the back of that Lamborghini engine on the off throttle coming into the chicane.
Improvement a little bit from Andrea de Cesaris on a 1:25.4. He's now in 15th place, and I think, Michael Schumacher.
Yes, a big spin for Schumacher. He's very, very lucky indeed not to hit the barrier, but that car is out of action for the rest of the day. It is beached on the curbing. So Schumacher, fortunately, he only has to go across the barrier and run about 100 yards, and he's back into the back of the pit. But you can see the skid marks. He lost it on the exit of that Ascari chicane, and as I say, very lucky indeed not to plant that car backwards into the barrier.
Not only that, John, he's lost his first set of tyres as well.
Yes, well, fortunately, here you see, look, well, he lost it even before he got to the apex. Probably coming through the left-hand part, the right-hand part of that chicane, he got offline, and then the car just swapped ends, and you see him already well and truly. Well, he was very fortunate. He got the brakes on. The skid marks there proved that he had locked brakes, and in fact, the curbing itself helped slow the car down. Damage to the underbody of the car, but and maybe a little bit of a look inside the engine, because all that gravel and sand can get into the airbox and therefore down into the induction of the engine. Well, disappointment indeed for Michael Schumacher, because currently on the third row of the grid, 6th place beside Gerhard Berger, an improvement over his yesterday's time, but he is now back to the spare car, and as you quite rightly point out, he's only now got one set of race tyres for the remaining, let's say, 52 minutes of this session.
Nigel Mansell still on pole position. His fastest lap was a 1:22.586, and a couple of weeks ago when there was a Monza test, Damon, you did it at 1:22.8, if I believe was right. And then everybody said, well, wait till Mansell and Patrese come here and we'll be back into the 1:21s, but we're not. How does it feel like that?
Well, I mean, that's obviously, it shows what a good driver I am, doesn't it? Well, I mean, I expected, to be honest, that the times would be a lot quicker. Naturally, when you get to a competition, the driver finds a little bit more time himself, and there's a little bit more, the engines are prepared a little bit better. You'd expect to see the times quicker, but we have had a lot of rain here, and maybe that's made the track a little bit slower.
When you were here testing, Damon, it's normal for a team to go through the variety of setups with high downforce, well, not high downforce, but let's say not a very low downforce setup, not with the minimum amount of wing in the car. What way did you find, without giving too much away, that the optimum setup for the Williams was around here, to go the very low downforce route, or in fact to sacrifice a little bit of top speed but pick it up through chicanes like this, and therefore the overall lap time to be quicker?
Well, you're absolutely right, John, and that is the dilemma of this circuit. It's got a lot of long straights, and you can't afford to run too much wing because you're sacrificing straight line speed. But on the other hand, you've got two incredibly fast corners, and this is one of them we're looking at now, the Parabolica, which leads onto a long straight. If you're not running enough wing on that, then you'll come out slow and you'll be slow on the straight. So it's always a trade-off. That's JJ Leto just putting in a time.
But what do you think? I mean, how would Mansell or Patrese, and if you were going out to test today, feeling that the circuit probably not quite as quick as it might have been when you tested, how would you personally like to set your car up, the Williams up, for these conditions?
Well, I would like to have the car so I could take the second Lesmo flat, because I feel like there's time to be had if you actually keep your foot in and you're not having to lift off. If the car's nervous, then it's easier to make a mistake, and that's just that small lift will cost you a massive amount of time.
And really looking at Michael Schumacher jogging his way back to the pits, I suspect that Benetton have been running as little downforce as they can to optimize the top speed, and they've had very good top speeds throughout the weekend, which is an indication again that they've got a lowish setup. But the penalty, of course, was losing it in that chicane.
Well, I saw actually when he did his first time, it's he managed to do an out lap. He went out and did his first flying lap, was a quick time, and then Schumacher backed off for that last run, and he was obviously cooling the tyres down in an attempt to have another go later on. So maybe he didn't do the right thing. He maybe backed off too much, and the tyres weren't up to temperature, something like that.
In the meantime, Andrea de Cesaris, currently he's made a small improvement. He's in 15th place, gone 1/10 of a second quicker than he did yesterday afternoon. That was the Friday session. And generally speaking today, and it appears the circuit, it is a bit quicker than it was on the Friday afternoon. Marginally quicker maybe than it was even on Friday morning. So we're still waiting for Nigel Mansell to be out. We've seen Riccardo Patrese go out, but he's gone out and come straight back in again. So both Williams really not yet seen in anger here this Saturday afternoon.
Mansell, that 1:22.586, then Ayrton Senna only 0.3 of a second away. John Alesi 1/10 of a second behind Ayrton Senna in third, and then Riccardo Patrese, who has, as John says, done an out lap but come straight back into the pits. Gerhard Berger hasn't been out yet, and talking about Berger, Senna and the McLaren team, both the cars, as far as we can find out this morning, all three of the cars are back to passive suspension. All the active suspension has been taken off, and they're normal sprung cars, John.
Yes, Gerhard Berger mentioned this morning that they've gone back to the to the passive car. They've taken the active kit off the car. And the problem is really that it's still very much in its development stages, and they feel that the car, when you get close to the limit, the messages, the signals that both Senna and Berger are getting are not signals that inspire confidence. You're not really quite sure when you get to the very edge, to the limit of adhesion, when the car is going to break away. And of course that means a driver is not inclined to want to lean on the car as hard as you would do with the passive car, where you get those messages very much more clearly. And again, the messages we have been having throughout the season from the Williams team is that Nigel Mansell copes with that probably a lot more comfortably than Riccardo Patrese is doing. That's just a simple, the question of feel. I know when I drove a Grand Prix car, if I didn't get those signals coming through loud and clear, I wasn't inclined to drive on what I used to call blind faith. Now, Damon, you've been driving the car a great deal over the past year. How do you cope with a signal to you as a driver which may not be quite so clear as that in a passive car?
Well, you're absolutely right, John. You rely on the sensations, all the millions of inputs that you get through conventional suspension to tell you what exactly the car's doing. And now you're talking about a car that runs on hydraulics, basically, and it's not behaving in the same way. It's more difficult to ascertain where you are and how close you are to the limit. And also, the other thing about it, without revealing too much about it, which I can't do, but it stands to reason that the car will cope with the input that you generate. So to some degree, the faster you go, the more it copes, which is the opposite to a normal car.
A bit like an old ground effect car, John, where sort of the faster you go through a corner, the more downforce you get, isn't it?
Indeed, and of course ground effect cars reducing similar downforces to the current Grand Prix cars, achieving it in a slightly different manner, but certainly the way ground effect works is it increases by the square of the speed. So theoretically a current Grand Prix car could run upside down on the roof of anybody's house at 160 miles an hour, and it would stick to the ceiling, such as the degree of downforce that these flat-bottomed cars are now generating. The figure is something like about at 160 miles an hour, they probably generate around about 4,500 pounds of downforce. That's a massive amount, bearing in mind the aerodynamics that these cars have compared to the pure ground effect car, which of course had aerodynamic tunnels, sliding skirts, etc.
The top six here in Monza is still the same: Mansell, Senna, Alesi, Patrese, Berger and Schumacher. We're 15 minutes into this session, and we'll be back right after this short break. Welcome back here at Monza, and this is what happened with John Alesi this morning. And John, you can say whatever you want.
Well, again, as I said, irrepressible Alesi coming up to pass Morbidelli. Morbidelli pulled well over to the right to let him through, but under braking, rear brakes locked down. The car started to slide. as you see, the right rear rode over the left front of Morbidelli's car. Here's the in-car shot of it. Back end stepped out. Again, running a very, very low downforce package, I suspect. And that just shows you how marginal it is between being in and out of control here around this Monza circuit. And that's the end result of it. So Lazy's car damaged, pushed away. They've got a few spare cars here. And they'll just pluck another one out of the box. Here's another angle. They've got more angles here at Monza. There's probably any other racetrack. This little incident is being analysed, discussed. The Italian press undoubtedly will go through it with a tooth comb.
Well, the other thing Damon said when we saw that incident earlier on was that the right rear wheel just doesn't want to go away. I think it's a brake line actually that just doesn't want to brake, was it?
Well, in the meantime, Michael Schumacher out in the spare car, and while we were showing you that a lazy incident, Ayrton Senna went out on his first lap and had a massive blow-up of a V12 engine coming into the Ascari chicane. So for Ayrton Senna, more problems. In the meantime, look, Michael Schumacher marginally quicker than the best you've seen from Nigel Mansell. Into Lesmo 1, just feathering the throttle in fourth gear, then hard on it just at the apex, then fifth gear. I would suspect Schumacher's flat through there because he wouldn't even think of going through any other way.
Well, we're looking at Michael Schumacher. There has been an improvement from Mika Häkkinen, who's now in 8th position. In 9th, it's Ivan Capelli, and 10th is Thierry Boutsen. Well, we wait for that second intermediate point, and he's half a second slower, but I must say that's closer than he's ever been, trying to get a toe from Mauricio Gugelmin's Jordan Yamaha. And what is it going to be? Can Michael Schumacher take Jean Alesi off that second row? Well, we'll see.
Well, I think Patrese and Alesi are vulnerable at this lap. If Schumacher can maintain the momentum, 23.6, fifth, so he didn't quite make it onto the second row, but an improvement. He's demoted Gerhard Berger from 5th down to 6th. And again, as we saw yesterday, the first intermediate time, Schumacher, Jean Alesi, they were able to be quicker than Mansell, but it's back to those two Lesmo corners. That is where I think, and particularly in the second one, Mansell can keep the drive on there where nobody else was able to do that. And of course, by doing so, again, if you see the first intermediate time quicker than Nigel Mansell, but it's through this corner. But I suspect through the second of the two Lesmos that Schumacher cannot quite get through that corner and down this straight up to the Ascari chicane, and that's where the majority of time that he's losing is being lost.
Schumacher going up to that Ascari chicane, and after the chicane we've got the second of the intermediate times. Cool bit of a wobble going in. That's where he lost it on this very first set of tyres, and he's a little closer, I'd say, John.
Yes, he maintained the momentum through that chicane. Again, watching Schumacher through there, you can see how lightly the downforce in that car is. Again, wobbling into the parabolica. The back end momentarily stepped out. He really, I don't think, bothered to lift off. He just drove that car through it. But again, you lose tenths, even thousandths of a second. Well, 23.6, virtually 23.644. Some minute seconds slower than his first effort. Now he's backed off. This will be a slow lap.
Improvement from Thierry Boutsen, who's now 7th, and Martin Brundle, who is in 8th position. He's improved a little bit, but not much. Brundle in 8th, Boutsen in 7th, Capelli 9th, and Häkkinen in 10th.
Damon, when you're watching the qualifying here with us, can you equate what you're seeing on the screen with what you were doing when you were here testing, in terms of the points in the circuit where you know the compromise is at its maximum?
I was impressed watching Schumacher that time. I mean, he clearly, up until the third chicane, before the Lesmos, like you were saying, he was really on the limit. You could see coming out of the first chicane that he was putting the power down. But it's not going very wide there. There's a lot of time to be had with and there's Senna's car parked up. That'll be. He's only got one set of tyres left. That means for Senna. But yes, I mean Schumacher was making up time in the first half of the circuit, but he's losing it for the rest of it. I can't see why, because there's not really that much difference between the two halves of the circuit. They've got two quick corners. That's the biggest difference. But the parabolica is very important. You can lose a lot of speed if you go into that corner too quickly. So maybe he was trying too hard.
Well, we certainly saw as he went into the parabolica, the back end of the car stepped out, which might have meant he had to come momentarily off the throttle. But the drive from parabolica is vital, as you say. It's the end of the lap. If the tyres have got any life in them, it's where you need that tyre life. And very often you see people, when they begin a flying lap, they enter the corner probably 500 to 1,000 revs slower than they would do on a flying lap. But in fact, that is actually quicker, because the car is not sliding. They're using just the power to drive the car. They don't have the side slip. Now you see Alesi, this is, I suspect, the beginning of a quick lap. He didn't run as wide early in that corner, but he got the maximum drive off. Now let's watch Alesi. Hopefully we can see him begin this lap.
Alesi, who has not posted his time yet, so it'll be his very first flying lap of the day.
Yes, and suspects that he did use a little bit less speed into parabolica, but got a really good push off. And we saw yesterday afternoon that somewhere or other Ferrari drew performance that they haven't had and into the on-time sessions. And well, that's the magic of Ferrari, as they say. Alesi again on the ragged limit, 2.5 tenths quicker than Mansell at the first intermediate time. Watch him through Lesmo, the second Lesmo, because this is going to be exciting. Can he keep it off the curbs? Ooh, well, he didn't get it as high as we've seen other people, but you can just see what that curb does. Makes the car wobble around, makes it a little bit unstable, maybe lost a tenth of a second. Here's where he spun this morning. Car again unstable through there, particularly as he goes from left to right. He runs very wide on the exit of that chicane. He's lost, in fact, 0.7 of a second between the first and second intermediates. Niki Lauda looking at the screen from the pit counter of the pit lane. Now the final thrust from parabolica. 7-speed gearbox in the Ferrari, so his little fingers going like a pianist in that gear change in the Ferrari. Well, he's up to third place.
Well, he was up to third place. But it's his best time of the day anyway, a 1:23.429. And will Jean Alesi do another lap and try and get Ayrton Senna off that front row? And that would be a marvellous performance by the whole Ferrari team. And if I remember right, the last Ferrari victory here was 1988 when Gerhard Berger won.
Oh, and he went very wide, Jean. I thought he was on a slowing down lap, a cooling lap. Well, he certainly is now. Coming into that first chicane, ran too wide. If you get offline here, there's a very fine grit on the surface. And here we see him again. This is the exit from Lesmo. You can see how high the car rode up that curb. Got a wobble on the exit. I suspect Alesi did not lift off. He just drove the car through it. I mean, that's the equivalent to a tank slapper on a motorcycle. Here we see him coming through the same corner. He missed the apex by quite a bit there, Damon, would you think?
He looked well placed, but the problem with the curb on the exit is that it tends to grab the steering out of your hands, and you either go up it all the way or you don't go up it at all. But he's sort of going up it halfway, which is I don't think he lost any time there. But it's very interesting seeing both Schumacher and Alesi. There's a lot of smoke coming from.
This is from Gerhard Berger. Again, he got back on the power, and we saw that little fine vapor coming from the back of the car. Now, I know that Ayrton Senna had an engine blow up on his first out lap. It's very unusual for Honda to have unreliability with the V12 engines, but certainly that indicated the engine was breathing very heavily indeed.
Gerhard Berger, who incidentally has taken 5th place of Michael Schumacher on his very first flying lap. So Gerhard, well, half a second down on Mansell, so that's about the same time Michael Schumacher was. And then Schumacher has that big wobble going into parabolica, so we might see Berger going even quicker and try and get Riccardo Patrese time.
It's at this part of the circuit that the advantage that McLaren have with the power of that V12 Honda engine does pay, because from that point to the start-finish line, he will get there quicker, just purely they've got more horsepower.
Well, it didn't work. He's a second off the fastest time, and that means he was doing a 23.6. Well, Gerhard, another try for the Austrian, who actually won that race for Ferrari in 1988 here. Well, he just keeps going, John.
He does. I mean, he's over that curb. I mean, I hate that curb on the exit of this Scauri chicane. Alesi has gone over it ever since he's been a Grand Prix driver. we've seen him get the car virtually sideways. Now here into Parabolica, it's a corner that the temptation is to drive into it very quickly indeed, overdrive into the corner. In reality, what you want to do is not do that. In fact, probably brake some 10, 15 meters earlier and try and get the power on before you get to the apex. In other words, before you get to where you would ordinarily have the power on, have it on maybe that 10 or 15 meters earlier. Look at Alesi's hands all over the place, fighting the Ferrari. I mean, the guy doesn't know when to give up. I mean, I'd like to see Jean Alesi in a really competitive Grand Prix car. The most we've seen him in really competitive cars, and ironically, was back in 1989 and 1990 when he drove for Ken Tyrrell. And we saw him fighting for the lead in Phoenix and in Monte Carlo. But since he's been at Ferrari, well, he's never really had such a competitive car.
Well, we're looking at Jean Alesi going around. Gerhard Berger improving yet again. Although he's still in 5th place, he's only a 10th behind Riccardo Patrese at the moment. Talking about quick guys in quick cars, and I think we might as well ask you now, because I'm going to ask you sometime during this hour, what's the plan with you now? Brabham sort of seems to be not going to any Grand Prix anymore, Damon.
That's right, Brabham has not been to the last 2 races. I'm not entirely sure what the long-term future is for the team, but it seems that for this year at least they're not going to be appearing. But anything can happen. I don't know exactly what will happen though.
Well, we're still in car with Jean Alesi, and you can see coming into Parabolica the amount of movement within the cockpit. And again, you can see from the angle of the rear wing, not very much downforce on that Ferrari.
Jean Alesi is currently in 3rd place on the provisional list of qualifiers here at Monza, which is still headed by Nigel Mansell. Ayrton Senna is in the pits in his car, and he's still in 2nd place. 3rd Alesi, as I said, 4th Patrese, and 5th Berger. We'll be back very soon. Eurosports, where we're just in time to see Nigel Mansell's first intermediate time. And when Damon was saying during the break, said, isn't it funny that both the Benettons and the Ferraris are faster than Mansell's time during the first intermediate and then be slower on the overall lap? Well, Mansell was faster than his own fastest time there.
But in fact, Allard, he was still slower than Schumacher or Alesi and that first intermediate time. But it's on this back part of the circuit that Mansell and the Williams are able to maintain that pace, whereas the other 2 teams we've seen lose probably up to a second. So we got Mansell on his first qualifying effort here on Saturday afternoon at Monza, and he has maintained, in fact improved. So we're anticipating possibly an improvement from Mansell. He certainly went a 10th of a second quicker this morning, and I would think probably around about a 10th of a second is what the improvement we anticipate seeing at the end of this lap. So 22.484 was what he did this morning. 22.672 when he lost, as you can see, 86 thousandths of a second.
So he lost nearly 2 tenths from that second intermediate point to start finish.
Well, remember, that was his opening shot. He went out, did an acclimatization lap, stood on it. Well, he's backed off, and he's going to allow, we think, maybe he hasn't. It's difficult to judge coming through the Curva Grande. It's such a long shot. In fact, I would say that Nigel's not. He's getting on with the program. What do you think, Damon? Is he going to have a second go at the series?
He's definitely on a second lap. Well, it's a shame we lost the picture, but he actually was using quite a lot of the curbs. So I'd say that he's pretty wound up that he hasn't gone quicker already on his first flying lap. But these tyres that they're on are B compounds, so they're good for a good couple of laps anyway.
How long would you say it takes the tyre to come to its optimum performance window?
I think that the second time lap could well be the better for the tyres. The first time lap, they do take a little bit of warming up. He's right on the edge of the track there now. I was watching from this part of the circuit yesterday, and he was very, very quick into the Parabolica. Incredible.
Well, we're looking for an improvement on that 22.586, and there we see it, 22.361, and that is the quickest we have seen throughout the weekend from anybody. Nigel Mansell consolidating his pole position, and really I don't think anybody, either Riccardo Patrese, Ayrton Senna or Jean Alesi, is about to eclipse Nigel Mansell. But we're not seeing the kind of domination, Damon, here at Monza that we've seen throughout the rest of the season. Ordinarily we've seen that very comfortable 1 second or 1.5 seconds between the Williams and everyone else. Now, obviously, teams are improving. That's part of Formula One. But I would expect Williams, likewise, with the advantages they have, to still be able to maintain that.
Well, you're absolutely right. I think that I would have expected to see a bigger gap from the Williams team to the next driver. But this is predominantly a horsepower circuit in terms of track length to the amount of corners there are. If you say compare this to Hungary, then it's the total opposite. There aren't any corners virtually. It's all straight line speed. So I don't know. Maybe at the moment the team is not as strong in that department as it needs to be.
Looking at places 9 to 16, you've seen the places for 1 to 8 already, with Mansell still on pole, Senna, who hasn't posted a time yet, John Alesi, Riccardo Patrese, and all the rest of the field, which basically doesn't change a lot. Mauricio Gugelmin just leaving the pits. There are Eric Comas, Ayrton Senna and Christian Fittipaldi, and the two men who still haven't qualified yet are Eric van der Poel and Stefano Modena. Van der Poel hasn't been out at all, and Modena has done a 1:28.112, which is a long way of qualifying his car. A big improvement comes from Johnny Herbert, who is now in 15th spot.
Well, Johnny Herbert seeming not to have such a successful weekend so far. Mika Häkkinen really being the more dominant of the two Lotus drivers. Well, Häkkinen, I'm sure, will be not the most comfortable man here this weekend. He will not want to have a reoccurrence of that steering wheel coming off in his hands. And he was most fortunate indeed not to have an incident.
Well, Ayrton Senna being held up, I think, by both Bertrand Gachot and Michael Schumacher. Well, now coming into the third chicane, he's got a... Sorry, second chicane.
Third chicane.
Third chicane.
He is, in fact, just this is an out lap. And Senna wanted to get through the traffic. You see Bertrand Gachot leading the train of 3-4 cars. So Senna now with a clear track, and again this very vital parabolic corner. Now Senna using every one of those, we believe, close to 800 horsepower on standard pump fuel. Remember, all that jungle juice that we saw in the first half of the season is now outlawed. And Senna crossing the line, beginning what is going to be his first qualifying outing. And remember, he did go out much earlier in the session, and he had a very rare blow up from his V12 Honda engine. And now through this long Curva Grande corner, flat out, of course, no big problems at all, exiting somewhere around about 185, 190 miles an hour, 0.2 of a second off Nigel Mansell's quickest time at that first intermediate point. I mean, this Lesmo 1 corner, great corner for a driver. You've really got to let the car work in that corner. You try to pinch it, try to pull the car down into the corner, it'll snap, the back end will get away from you. And of course, your exit speed then determining just how much quicker you will get through Lesmo 2 and down that long straight into this chicane. And again, you can see that McLaren very fidgety as he comes through the chicane. 1.2 seconds now, the deficit between himself and Nigel Mansell. So this is not going to be of any significant improvement. Ayrton Senna currently on a 1:22.822. Well, this lap somewhere in the 23 bracket, judging by the differential in time between himself and Mansell.
Well, Senna is still on that front row, and he was in Hungary. Sorry, he was faster than Mansell in Hungary, and he was faster off the line in Spa. And if he can stay there, well, we might see that McLaren into that first corner first. But then the big problem here, of course, is that it's much easier to overtake here than it is in, let's say, Hungary, John.
Indeed it is, but nonetheless, you've got to get the drive out of any particular corner. And what we've seen Ayrton Senna do so cleverly in the past is slow down everyone behind him. Here we are in-car Martin Brundle through the first chicane. You can see how much of the curbing Brundle and other drivers are using from that in-car shot. Unsettles the car a lot, but it is essential to get a quick time. You've got to just drive through the discomfort, the unstableness it provides the car with. It's got to be more crucial coming into the second chicane. It's very easy to overdrive coming into that chicane. Well, back in car with John O'Leary, now back to the exit of that second chicane, into Les number 1 and through Les number 2. The car, you want to stay off that exit, the curbing at the exit. We saw Naspetti climb all over the curbs and then shoot off to the left. Lucky not to do any more damage to his marks than he did.
Or himself.
Or himself, indeed. Brundle exiting. He's got Pierluigi Martini. He will try and pick up the draft as much as he can from Martini, but also he's got to judge how close he will be to Martini in this final Parabolica.
And that's not a very quick lap from Martin Brundle. And Pierluigi Martini, who's been given the black flag in Hungary and a stop and go penalty when he held up the whole train of cars behind him for a couple of laps, so Martin Brundle not in the best of positions for the moment. Well, there we go. New tyres. 15 minutes to go, 20 minutes to go. What's going to happen?
Well, I think what's going to happen is fairly academic, but what's going to happen in an hour and a quarter really is what most people here at Monza are going to be concerned about, because our Nige has called a press conference and he is going to give us the benefit of his wisdom, as I think the sort of the chairman Nigel, let's say that Nigel Mansell is going to call a press conference anyway at 3 o'clock, I think, to discuss how he sees his future, possibly in IndyCar racing, but we all hope regards his future in Grand Prix racing. This man, of course, Ayrton Senna, waiting for Nigel Mansell to decide what his future is going to be, because should he decide to be attracted to IndyCar racing with the Newman Haas team, the team that Michael Andretti has left to come into Grand Prix racing, well, that is the man who would be, I think, into the seat that Nigel Mansell vacates quicker than you can say Williams-Renault.
Looking at one of the Ferraris, and I actually think it's Ivan Capelli who was going through the woods there. Then in the background now we can see Gabriele Tarquini, and Tarquini is another man to make a big improvement today, and he's moved up to 17th place, just behind Johnny Herbert, both with Ford HB power. I think it's sliding too much, Damon.
Well, no, you could just see that Nigel was very much close to the edge of the track coming out of the Parabolica. I think he made a very good exit out of that corner. Whoops, a little bit too much curve, bit of oversteer. He's definitely using the curves, like John was saying, in every possible way. Be interested to see the split time now for this first half of the lap coming up.
Well, this looks a very physical lap from Nigel Mansell, of course. Now he's got traffic ahead of him, driving down the inside. Well, Mr. Grillard, our friend Olivier Grillard, who is economical with the use of his mirrors, he has moved over to the right. So really Nigel's pretty well unimpeded by the traffic ahead of him. Undoubtedly, he will, of course, said that the traffic lost him probably about 15 seconds that lap. But we know, as does everybody watching Eurosport here live at Monza, that is not the case. And Nigel, very determined indeed, and he is a very physical driver. I mean, he's a very strong man indeed, tremendous strength in his forearms and upper body, and he drives in a physical way much more so than in a finesse manner.
Well, he also plays soccer in a very physical way, John.
Well, I think he sized into a few of you journos last night in that little game of football you were playing after qualifying finished. But he was slower in that final intermediate time than we saw in his best lap in the earlier part of the session. 22.2, well, he increased it. He got quicker, 22.221. Nigel Mansell even quicker, and that was his first lap. This is the lap that Damon thinks could be quicker, and that first lap, as we saw, not as clean as he was through the chicane for the second time.
Not only Nigel Mansell improved on his lap time, also Ivan Capelli, who's now up to 7th place, Woodson back to 8th, Brundle to 9th, and Häkkinen still in 10th.
Using the curbing more efficiently on this lap, not quite so desperate, he's not pushing as hard. It's always easy to overdrive on these qualifying laps. You try so hard, but quite often it's a case of more haste, less speed. And certainly on this second lap we were watching Nigel Mansell, who seemed to have lost everybody. He appeared to be cleaner on the exits, and that is an indication, I feel, that in fact we might see yet another improvement from Mansell.
Well, if we are...
Has gone off to Ivan Capelli.
I was going to say, if we are, we're going to see it on our Tag Heuer Olivetti monitor, but not on screen, because we've gone to Ivan Capelli, who also has gone quicker, but is now on a very slow lap. There's Nigel Mansell. We don't know what the time is. We just got to wait and see till he crosses. Oh, there's the time again. That's very handy. Thank you very much. And it is slower. Only just, but it is slower. So Mansell stays on pole position with that 1:22.221 in front of Ayrton Senna, Jean Alesi and Riccardo Patrese with 14 minutes to go here in Monza. Sport, we're watching the last minutes of the second qualifying session here in Monza, and there is Gianni Morbidelli, who is very quick in 11th place, just improved this time and puts his car high on the curves, locks the tires, but a good effort by the Italian in Italy, driven by an Italian engine and fuel, John.
Indeed it is, and Gianni Morbidelli obviously benefiting from a great deal of development work, continuing work by Lamborghini. They feel that their engine is actually quite a lot better than it gets to be seen. And of course, Agip are the fuel supplier, as they are here with Ferrari. And well, everybody pulling out the stops, let's say, to maximise performance and qualification, to try and get as many of those Italian teams and drivers to the fore here at Monza. Gerhard Berger completing a lap. We saw him a few moments ago go out, and this is really about the last chance Berger has to make any significant improvements. 23.553, some 0.4 of a second away from his quickest time this afternoon, and over the curbs again. It is vital to do that. It looks, I think, appalling. Very, very hard indeed in the car. The loads that those rumble strips in the curb transmit into the car. Well, fortunately, the cars will be taken apart. There'll be new corners all round, a fresh engine, a complete new gearbox transmission unit. The only thing that remains constant is, in fact, the basic chassis. Michael Schumacher got Andrea de Cesaris ahead of him. Look at that, Suzuki, Eric van der Poel. Well, they're not coming to play in the chicane, but they certainly will coming into Parabolica, and I hope that they're aware that Michael Schumacher charging up behind. Suzuki certainly has got his attention, but he's staying well to the right. Schumacher picking up a little bit of a toe, but not really going to make big contribution to this lap.
It's a slow lap from Michael Schumacher, and that gives me time to say that Eric van der Poel has improved in this session, and that means Christian Fittipaldi and Stefano Modena are both non-qualifiers at the moment. And Eric van der Poel improving yet again, so on the bubble now is Mauricio Guzman. So out of the two Jordans, it doesn't look very good.
Well, we've had one of the two Ligier, Mr. Colmas, Eric Boutsen. Thierry Boutsen gone across the gravel in that first chicane. Now, he shouldn't restart that car if he lost the engine. If the engine stalled when that car stopped, it should be pushed away to the side. Thierry Boutsen, of course, very keen to stay with Ligier. The car now being pushed behind the tire wall. Probably threw a bit of gravel onto the track at that point, making it even more slippery than it is. Riccardo Patrese, slight improvement from Patrese.
Well, that's only on today's time.
Yeah. Of course.
See that twin floor underneath that Ferrari. Actually, John, I wonder why they still run that twin floor, because it doesn't seem to work.
Well, what they've done is they've filled in the gap between the two floors. What they've tried to do is gain some of the theoretical advantages, but do away with all the drawbacks of the twin floor. But because that car is designed around that particular design philosophy, it is virtually impossible to do away with it in total unless they make a brand new car. Now, the intermediate car they will race next year will not have a twin floor, I believe. It will have a much more conventional floor, and I'm sure that will find a much more consistent handling package for the Ferrari team. The problem with the car is it is so pitch sensitive, minute, and I mean by less than tenths of inches of suspension movements upset by a substantial amount the downforce of the car will in our little box, we're looking at Nigel Mansell. He's gone off to get changed, to go into a quick debriefing with the team. And then on to that press conference. We're now some 66 minutes away from the words of Nigel Mansell. And hopefully we can bring you that very quickly indeed.
And we're still watching Sean Leighton. What is his first intermediate point? That's going to be the question. And it is a tenth slower, but he was very sideways going into the first chicane. Now, can he keep up the momentum? That's the question. Jean Alesi on this lap, a little slower. But then we saw Nigel Mansell being slower and suddenly pick up speed during the second half of that lap, didn't we, John?
Well, Mansell is the only person we have seen pick up speed in the second part of the circuit. So one has to assume that Alesi and everyone else are not about to... Oh, my goodness, look at the traffic ahead. Cars all over the place. Berger, what are they doing? Berger and Alboreto having a little argument. Something has happened there, the pair of them. Now, they are going to be taken in to see Peter War. He is the chief visa steward here. Whatever has been going on between Alboreto and Gerhard Berger has been caught by the cameras, and they will undoubtedly be taken in for a quick slap on the wrist. They may well, in fact, have the keys taken away from their cars for the rest of this session. Well, you'd expect two very mature drivers like Berger and Alboreto to be able to resolve those differences away from the racetrack. Not only were they tripping over one another, they were... Look, here we see it again. Alboreto, Berger going across. Now, which one of the two was the offended party in the first case? Now Berger doing the same. This is what you'd expect to see in Formula Ford, not at the highest echelon of Grand Prix racing.
And poor Stefano Modena mixed in between there, trying to get that fast lap to get into the Grand Prix here.
Well, that is one of the beauties of having cameras all around the circuit. You are no longer safe. In the days of old, well, Andrea de Cesaris with a very smoky Ilmore V10 engine. That one will not be going into the car for a race. Well and truly lunched. Here we see further shenanigans. So we see it coming into the chicane indeed. The blow-up happened at the end of the straight. Andrea managing to, I was going to say, control it. Well, he had oil over the rear tyres. Look at the liquid oil and water gushing. A real Torrey Canyon effort from Andrea de Cesaris. And rather sad because for Andrea back now to 20th place. Who is that? Is that Michael Schumacher?
That's Martin Brundle in the gravel. And that looks like the third chicane, actually. But there was improvement from Eric Comas, who's up to 14th, and also a big improvement from JJ Leto. Not the happiest man with the Dallara, but he's in 13th place.
And that looks like, we're going to say, that one of the two Tyrrells cars are now littered all around the circuit. There is Martin Brundle in the Ascari chicane, a mirror of what we saw Jean Alesi do this morning, but he didn't have the luxury of another car to bounce off, so he is well and truly into the gravel bed. We see again brakes locked on. Martin Brundle, one of the people not to improve on his time from yesterday. Martin's quickest lap today, 1 minute 25.253. Yesterday he did a 24.551. Back to another hero here at Monza, Riccardo Patrese.
Well, that's interesting.
Lap.
Yeah, but we haven't seen that many laps yet from Riccardo Patrese. His fastest is 24.2. And with a couple of minutes to go, we could well see Riccardo Patrese trying to get on the front row and even trying to get on pole position.
Well, this is not the lap he's going to do it. He's pulling over, allowing Wendlinger to go through. And with Patrese again, another like Alesi and Ayrton Senna, those three also have not improved.
Emmanuel Naspetti in the foreground and Riccardo Patrese in the background. That looks like Riccardo Patrese is going to come into the pits. Naspetti, incidentally, for his second Grand Prix is in... That's good, very good. Where is he? Oh, there he is, 24th position.
I thought I'd let you sort that out on your own, Allard. Well, back with Jean Alesi into Lesmo 1. Unfortunately, the picture breakup goes by the trees and the signal not getting together. The two Ferraris now on the track. If you're a Ferrari driver at Monza, you've got to spend as much time on the circuit as you are permitted.
And Lacy following teammate Ivan Capelli. Capelli another 4 Grand Prix to go. And oh, big improvements from Johnny Herbert again. Now up to 13th. And that's only 2 places behind his teammate Mika Hakkinen. And although they're 11th and 13th, again, very evenly matched, the 2 Lotus boys. Alesi, is he going to improve? No, he's not. No way he's going to improve, because that 22.976 is still his fastest lap. When I'm looking down, I can see the clerk of the course ready with the checkered flag. Well, he's got to wait another 40 seconds. And then this session will be over. A Benetton passing. There's 1 more lap to go for Michael Schumacher. Maybe he can improve. Also, Naspetti, 1 lap to go. And Riccardo Patrese, who has improved on today's time, but not overall. And they're very happy faces again in the Ferrari camp. We've seen happy faces all weekend, really, haven't we?
They've been reasonably happy at Ferrari. Certainly, I know last weekend there were a few very unhappy faces at Ferrari. But that article that appeared in the Sunday Times last weekend has, I think, been put behind people now. And really, Ferrari looking to a future in 1993 where they can begin to reconstruct this once great team. And I think that there's no motor racing fan that I know would not want to see Ferrari regain the ground they've lost over the last few years and become a competitive force in Grand Prix racing, to become, in fact, the team that provides a World Championship winning driver and maybe to be the winning team itself, the winning constructors team itself.
Michael Schumacher passing Eric Comas there, and Alesi, I think, was trying to start another lap, but it's not going to be, because the man with the checkered flag is there. And I think the big question is Schumacher going to improve? Very lazy pass, start, finish. Michael Schumacher, who has not improved on his best lap, which still stays as a 23.619. So nothing really happening in those last minutes of qualifying, with Nigel Mansell on his 28th pole position, and alongside him, Ayrton Senna.
I'd just like to put Damon on the spot here and say, Damon, you've seen 2 days of qualification. We haven't seen the kind of advantage that we're accustomed to from the Williams-Renault team. Do you think that anybody can really challenge either Riccardo Patrese or Nigel Mansell here on Sunday afternoon?
Certainly, there's a race tomorrow. It's always open. There's no foregone conclusion here whatsoever. But I must say that the Williams team always have, and will continue to have the rest of this year, a little bit of an advantage. But I'd like to have seen a bigger advantage than that, and I think they would too.
Well, the top 8 was on your screen. Mansell and Senna, that's the front row. Then Jean Alesi and Riccardo Patrese. The third row will be Gerhard Berger and Michael Schumacher. Ivan Capelli and Thierry Boutsen is the next one. Then it's Brundle, Gasho, Hakkinen, Morbidelli, Herbert, Leto, Comas. And you can see them all on your screen. Non-qualifiers for the 4th time this year, Stefano Modena. And for the 2nd time in a row after his comeback, Christian Fittipaldi. So Stefano Modena, well, if we thought, John, that the Jordan team was going through a horrible time, I think Modena himself is going through an even more horrible time.
Yes, and again, and particularly here for the Italian Grand Prix at Monza, more disappointment in a very critical, crucial year for Stefano Modena.
9 Italians on the Formula 1 starting list. 8 Italians will be on the grid out of 26 starters, and they will be headed by the world champion tomorrow here in Monza. And of course, Eurosport will be bringing you full coverage, first with the warm-up tomorrow morning, which, if you're on the continent, is from 10:30 to 11, and that's 9:30 to 10 in the UK. We're all thank you for watching now, and hope to see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
While at the track, Nigel, in a whirl of contract mayhem, was going still faster, improving to 1 minute 22.221 seconds for pole, ahead of Senna's first session time.
Very thrilled that I was only one of the top 4 drivers to actually go quicker today. So, I mean, I'm drawing some satisfaction from that.
And Ferrari in their home Grand Prix as well must be pleased. John Lacey on the second round, probably the first time this season.
They have a good qualifying engine, and Jean will be behind me on the grid, and I don't know whether that's a good or a bad thing, because he'll be fired up here at Monza. It's imperative that I get a good start tomorrow.
Ayrton Senna's probably the closest he's been to you all, yeah? Do you think he's trying to prove a point?
Well, I mean, I don't know about proving anything. I mean, any driver out there, whether it's Ayrton Senna, Jean Lacey, or any of the other drivers competing, they always try and go as quickly as they can. It just means that their car is working better here, and their engine power is still good.
If I could change the subject from qualifying to the contract situation, Senna's been a thorn in your side for most of your career, and it appears he's trying to blight you again by nicking your drive. How do you feel about that behaviour?
That's history, and he dialed himself out in Spa, and as I understand it, Prost has a total exclusivity against him, and even certain things against me. So, I'll pass no comment on historical things.
But there's counter rumour and rumour. I mean, the suggestion might have been that it was all brinkmanship, and he's trying to force somebody's hand.
Well, I'm not prepared to speculate on rumour. I'd rather talk about what I do know.
I told us yesterday morning that there might be something happening, and
well, there could have been a whole number of things happening today, but the goalposts move, as ever, very quickly in Formula One, and prudence is prevailing. In as much as I'm being patient, I'm listening, and as soon as I leave you here now, I should be making a phone call to my wife to discuss certain things and revelations I found out about today. And it might well be that, I might take charge of the situation tomorrow. I've got a phone call as well to make somewhere else. I'm having to be patient, and obviously, until I know, you can't know.
Sure. I mean, are you offended by what's been going on? Presumably you must be.
Well, I think I can't be offended when I won the World Championship, and I'm disappointed. Offended, no. I mean, because it's business, it's commercial reality. It's one of the facts of life, and who said life was fair? I don't agree with it. I'll go as far as to say that. But, nothing is over until it's over, and we've just got to be patient.
And are you prepared to put a time scale on maybe how much longer you're prepared to wait?
Well, while I'm still talking and hearing different stories conflicting all the time, and I've got another meeting tonight, I've only come back here just to obviously do this programme and speak to you. As soon as we've done this, I shall be returning to get back into the foray of it.
Time now for our special insight into the Monza circuit.
Right, here we are now, going on the fast lap here in Monza. Obviously in Italy, the race for tomorrow, but this is the fastest lap you can do, and the most important corner for overtaking and setting the fastest lap is coming around the Parabolica. You come around here in 4th gear, accelerating very quickly into 5th, and this is where Derek Warwick had his big accident some years ago. And then into 6th gear, and then this is where you are actually doing 334 kilometres an hour, which is obviously very, very quick indeed. This was a corner some years ago that John Watson in the McLaren hit the barriers and the engine flew off the back of the car, caught fire, and thankfully John was okay, but the most massive shunt in this corner is very, very dangerous. Accelerating all the way down the back straight, again reaching speeds of over 330 kilometres an hour. Braking very, very hard for the 3rd and last chicane, but down to 3rd is the fastest chicane on the circuit. And before you get the exit of the corner, you're up to 4th, and then changing here to 5th and 6th, and actually obtaining again about 290 kilometres an hour down here. Again, a light brake, and then this corner is mega important coming in here, because setting yourself up so you can overtake down the main straight. If you can get the lap right, you can do 1 minute 22.2 seconds, which just coincidentally happens. I'm very pleased to say that it is my 11th pole position this year. There you go, I've already signed it. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, a very, very quick lap of the Monza circuit.
As the sun sinks low over Monza, the bewildering, unresolved contractual situation was putting unbearable pressure on the world champion.
Bright and early, no rain at the moment, although it could be forecast for a little bit later on for showers. Optimistic for today. Obviously defending the pole position of yesterday was very, very satisfying. As I said, just catching up on last night, to be the only top driver to go a little bit quicker yesterday was probably more satisfying than people can think, especially here in Monza. Predictions for today, I think the warm-up will be critical. There are a few problems with the handling of the car. Tyre compound is very, very important because the tyres are getting up to 246 degrees, which is the total upper limits of the temperature of the tyre. We've got to be very, very careful on choice if we pit stop and when we do it. Big debrief this morning and briefing before we even get in the car with regard to the race engineer, fuel consumption figures, how much fuel we'll actually have in the car for this race, because as you can see by watching a little bit of footage, it's got 3 very, very large straights on it, so the engine has to work hard here, much harder than in fact it had to work in Spa. And as you're aware, in Spa we did have an electrical problem there with the engine. So a lot of things to be covered this morning.
What about the setup of the car?
Basically minimum aerodynamics that you can possibly run on full tanks, because straight line speed here is of the utmost importance for overtaking. It doesn't matter how quick you are in the corners. If you're not as quick or quicker than them down the straight, you just can't get past. So we'll be looking at the monitor this morning very, very carefully, just to see that our car is at least hopefully as quick as any other car down the straight. That was a problem yesterday. We weren't the quickest. We were 3 to 4 to 5 kilometres an hour slower down the straight, which we are a bit confused why, because normally we are as quick, if not a little bit quicker. So perhaps it's the new fuel regulation, or perhaps it's just the nature of this particular circuit, but it's not plain sailing, I can tell you. Great legs, but they're ever so tired.
Nigel's humour conceals the emotion and agony he's being put through as he heads for the track. As the flamboyant Italian fans make their way to the track by every conceivable method of transport, Nigel calls an emergency press conference straight after warm-up and drops a bombshell on the unsuspecting Formula One world.
Due to circumstances beyond my control, I have decided to retire from Formula One at the end of the season.
Despite a desperate last-ditch attempt by Williams to stop Nigel's announcement, the champion has had enough.